We all walk a rugged road, and it takes more than grit alone. We all need a little help to pave the way. Call it luck, call it fate, or something far beyond our strength. We all travel on gravel and grace. Hello and welcome to Rewind with James Kilbane. Thank you for joining us. Today, I've got Colin Elliot. Colin is a leading gospel singer here in Ireland. He's a composer, writer, and music producer. He's going to tell us about his life, music, and faith. Welcome to the show, Colin.
Thank you, James, and thank you so much for the invitation.
Good to have you. So, home, Colin, for you has been Northern Ireland and Portadown.
Yes, I grew up just outside Portadown, between Portadown and another town called Lurgan. And I grew up there. My father ran a carpet business. My mum was a housewife. And we grew up not in the inner town, but more just out slightly into the country.
Okay. And growing up the Elliott house, was it busy with music, or were you busy with work? Because your father was a businessman.
My father was a businessman, and he was selling carpets. He worked 9 to 5. He took a lot of time with us. Used to play golf every Wednesday. Used to take my brother and I fishing on a Saturday.
Okay.
But he loved music, and he was a gospel singer, and he would have sung around different events in Northern Ireland at that time. And there were always guitars and pianos and keyboards, organs in our house. So I grew up with music, and my dad loved country music. Mm-hmm. And he used to order in the old 8-track cartridges. Do you remember those? Mm-hmm. You show your age.
You have them in the cars.
Yes. And he used to actually order in a singer called George Hamilton IV. He was one of his favorite singers. And
as I'm sure many.
We'll come to it later on about how that turned around and transpired. I worked with George, but I grew up with that music: Charlie Pride, Johnny Cash, George Hamilton IV. So there was always music in our home.
And country music, because the Irish roots of country music, it mends so well even anywhere in rural Ireland. It's just one of those things. And you know, the gospel influences, were you drawn to it? Like you mentioned, all those influences. What in particular did you get involved? Were you involved in church in those early days?
Yeah, well, we went to church every Sunday, and I was also sent to what we call Sunday school, and we learned Bible verses, and we sang little gospel songs. But then something happened, James, which was really unusual. Of course, in Northern Ireland, in the 1970s, it was the middle of the Troubles. Northern Ireland was a very difficult place for everyone at that time. And very few people came to Northern Ireland. I think there was the band Status Quo and George Hamilton IV and Charlie Pride. I think they were the only ones that ever ventured into Northern Ireland. But there was a special, what we call a mission came, and it was a big blue tent. It was a Billy Graham type mission. And there was a guy called Dick Saunders was leading that. And many of the churches in the town came together, and they formed a big choir, and lots of people were attending. This was very different. And that really, for me, was the first time when I heard this man, Dick Saunders, speak, that I realized that going to church and the fact that my parents were Christians wasn't enough, that I needed to make a personal commitment as well. And even though I was only 8.5 years of age, that I was conscious there was sin in my life. And I remember going along, and I sort of felt that night that this was a crossroads in my life. And as the man spoke, as Dick Saunders spoke, and he made an altar call, I knew I had to go to the front and give my life to the Lord. And I did. And of course, at that age, I didn't really activate my faith, but that has come later as I've got older.
You know, that was 8. You, naturally going through, I suppose, life as a teenager, and then you went on to college and you've become a teacher. How has your faith influenced in that period of time? Because you had a lot coming at you as a teenager.
Yeah.
Like, where was the music? The country music was there, but what did you get involved in those development years?
I was very fortunate because when I was 14 years of age, I was asked to join a group, a gospel group through church. And there were two older guys. They were about 5 or 6 years older than me. And we practiced and rehearsed and started doing a few bookings together. And that developed into the group Live Issue, which is my band, which has reformed and is still going today.
In circles, yeah.
And I think because there was that accountability, because I had friends, we were involved in Christian work, I think that shielded me from getting involved in maybe a lot of things that I shouldn't have. As I said, Northern Ireland was a difficult time, and people that I knew were maybe getting involved in things they shouldn't have been. And certainly going on then to university, and that, obviously there's a bit of drinking and things like that can go on. But I always felt, because I was involved in Christian work and I was a Christian and had a relationship with the Lord, that I wanted to avoid that as far as possible. And that was good, having good Christian friends. So, I think getting into the right company is very, very important for young people.
And you've done the Grand Ole Opry so many times.
Did it 3 times. My children say they're going to put it on my headstone,
You're not maybe finished at 3.
Yes. Well, hopefully. Always open for invitations.
And that's a great experience.
It was a wonderful experience. I played twice at the Grand Ole Opry House, where it is now, and once at the Ryman Auditorium, which is the original home. Yeah. And that was whenever the other one had got flooded in 2010. There was a big flood, and they were using the Ryman. But just to stand on that stage where so many luminaries in gospel and country music have stood before is a tremendous experience.
And you lead in ministry, the music ministry with your own community.
Yeah, in my own church. My church is it's Presbyterian church just beside where we live. And I would be one of what we call a praise leader. So I would lead the singing for part of the service. We're very blessed in our church because we have got several singers and little groups who come together and work on a rota basis. And that keeps it fresh because we all have our own different styles. I tend to veer more to the old time gospel, whereas some of the other singers like the more modern praise and worship music. So there's something for everybody, and I think that's great.
Got joy in my heart, good news for these troubled days. There's a peace that I found, no headline can take away. Worry and fear I left at the foot of the cross. With Jesus I'm claiming back all the years I lost. Well, I never knew life until I give it all to Him. I let Jesus take control of a life that was tainted with sin. Holding to the promise that He will never let me go. Even when times are tough, I feel His blessings flow. And I'm following in His love, following in His love, following in His love every day, every day. Well, I'll never be rich, but what I've got is very clear. I wake up in the morning and know the things that I hold dear. Heaven's in my heart, but my feet are firmly on the ground. Living to a different beat that shows the joy I found. And I'm following in His love, following in His love, following in His love every day, every day. I've got joy in my heart, good news for these troubled days. There's a peace that I found, no headline can take away. Worry and fear I left at the foot of the cross. With Jesus I'm claiming back all the years I lost. And I'm following in His love, following in His love, following in His love every day. And I'm following in His love, following in His love, following in His love every day, every day.
Tell us about, because I'm a big fan of them, the Isaacs. How did that come around, and touring with them? They're wonderful. And they were up for a Grammy Award this year.
They were, and they just became members of the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville as well. Again, that came through an opportunity through an organization called Drop-In Ministries, and they do a tremendous work all over the world. They're based in Armagh, and they do relief work and ministry work throughout regions that are having difficulties and problems or natural disasters or whatever. So currently they're working in Ukraine. And they have had the Isaacs over before. Because I've done a few things with Drop-In Ministries, they asked if I would support the Isaacs. And that was such an honor. It was so humbling to be able to do that.
And how has that led, because you have other ministry work? Is it in Burma?
Yeah, that's interesting, because there are a few times when the education side of Colin Elliot and the musical side of Colin Elliot come together. And that's one of them, because we linked with a little school in Burma called Destiny Academy. And it's a privately run school. It's not a state school, but the funds are used then to generate church planting and ministry work. But we had the chance to go over and do some staff development, because the little school was growing. And because it was a good school, it was linked with our school. We helped support it with resources and also with teacher training.
Fantastic.
And it was a wonderful experience to go over there and work with the staff, along with some other teachers and principals as well. And I have such a heart for the work that they do. But of course, then a few years ago, then the military coup happened. And COVID hit them very hard. And actually the school was then transformed into a hospital. And we had to try and arrange for them to get oxygen out there, because the oxygen and the tanks were being confiscated by the military. So we had to try and work through Thailand and work through other countries to get the oxygen in there for this little school that had become a hospital. But it's now a school again. And it's gone from a little school of 50 or 60 children now to about 500.
There's key things that I ask everybody. What's the advice for anybody coming up in the industry that might be music industry writers, composers, singers? You know, they look at Christian artists, but they might want to be doing a bit of pop, or they think that Christian artists can't survive. Or what would which I don't agree, but what would your advice be? Because there's work in there. You've done a lot.
Yeah, well, I think you've clinched it when you say work. It takes a lot of work, and I think whatever you're doing in music or whatever walk of life you're in, it does take commitment. And sometimes that's where we can have the feeling in some of the television programs that we see where somebody suddenly shoots to fame. I don't think that's really the way it happens. It takes a lot of hard work. So you have to hone your craft, so to speak. And it's many years of practice. You'll know yourself, James, and working and recording and listening back to things and thinking, oh, why did I do that? I could have done that so much better. And, I think you've got to do that. You've got to be prepared to be committed to the work, committed to sing places, sing to small audiences before you sing to larger audiences. You're not going to sing at Croke Park straight away. It's going to take time. But Some people want to sing gospel because that's part of themselves. It's their faith. It's something that means a lot to them.
Calling.
It's their calling. But they may also want to do some secular music too. And from time to time, I do that as well, maybe at a wedding or whatever. For me, the difference, though, James, is when I'm singing gospel music, it's from my heart because it's something that's really important to me and that I believe, and my love for the Lord and what he has done for me, and he gave his life for me. You know, that's tremendous. When I'm singing secular songs, I love them too, but they're with my head. You know, they're different. It doesn't have the same personal feeling as say gospel music would have, because that's part of my being, or that's the way.
But you've had a lot of courage because you didn't bury the talents. Like you put them to use.
Oh, you have to do that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You've taken risks.
Yeah, you have to take risks, and you've got to do that, and you've got to try new things and take opportunities if and when they come. And you know, to sort of give you an example, whenever we first did the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, there was another girl from our church, and she was going out. She was doing some missionary work, but she was going away to the Far East, and she was going to be, I think it was Sri Lanka or somewhere like that. But she was going to be working up in the caves and the mountains with people who were insurgent fighters. And she was going to be ministering to them. And I used to think, wow, that's something I couldn't do. And I remember I didn't even tell a lot of people about what I was doing. I was going to the Grand Ole Opry. We were staying in a Holiday Inn or whatever it was. And I remember that night standing at the Grand Ole Opry, and we were doing a sound check, and it was almost as if a voice in my ear said, Colin, don't discredit what I've asked you to do. Mm-hmm. I don't want you going into a cave in Sri Lanka or wherever it is. I want you here, and I want you doing this, and I want you ministering to these people through the gifts that I've given to you. Because I almost felt a little bit ashamed because I wasn't roughing it, so to speak. But yet, at the same time, you know, for some people to stand on a stage like the Grand Ole Opry or anywhere like that, it would absolutely paralyze you if you thought about it.
For some people, yes.
All around the town, the news is quickly spreading. The word on the street, there's something in the air. There's a new man in town and everybody wants to meet him. I'm following the crowd to see if they can take me there. He's a carpenter who's traveled down from Nazareth, but at his word he calms the storm and gale. He turned water into wine and raised up Jairus' daughter. The lame can walk and the blind can see again. And there's a new man in town, and I've heard he walks on water. He heals the sick and he raises up the dead. There's a new man in town, and they tell me his name is Jesus. Well, I wonder to myself what this man's got to say. Oh, I wonder to myself what this man's got to say. Well, the people heard him say to love your neighbor and love the Lord with all your heart and soul. He overturned the tables in the temple and saved the girl the man were going to stone. And there's a new man in town, and I've heard he walks on water. He heals the sick and he raises up the dead. There's a new man in town, and they tell me his name is Jesus. Well, I wonder to myself what this man's got to say. Oh, I wonder to myself what this man's got to say. The leaders want him silenced. They've had enough. They want to see him dead. But he seems to know everything that's about to happen. How the Son of God will die but rise again. And there's a new man in town, and I've heard he walks on water. He heals the sick and he raises up the dead. There's a new man in town, and they tell me his name is Jesus. Well, I wonder to myself what this man's got to say. And there's a new man in town, and I've heard he walks on water. He heals the sick and he raises up the dead. There's a new man in town, and they tell me his name is Jesus. Well, I wonder to myself what this man's got to say. And there's a new man in town, and I've heard he walks on water. He heals the sick and he raises up the dead. There's a new man in town, and they tell me his name is Jesus. Well, I wonder to myself what this man's got to say. Oh, I wonder to myself what this man's got to say. Oh, I wonder to myself. I wonder to myself. Yes, I wonder to myself what this man's got to say.
Colin, there's something that we do, and in the program, there's a couple of things, and this is one that we'd like you to maybe select. In this bowl, there's a number of different scriptural pieces.
Yes.
And when you read the scriptural piece, maybe give us a little reflection on what it means to you.
Okay.
Would you do that? And
This puts you on the spot, doesn't it?
and the people watching. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let's see. Okay. So this is from Paul's letter to the Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 58. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. My goodness, doesn't that just tie in with what we've been talking about? It really does, because, you know, everything we do for the Lord, he will use. And I think that's important. Even the small things, even the things that you feel are so insignificant, if they're done with the right attitude and in service to the Lord, he will use them.
A lovely proverb: the birds of flight fly so high and they're wonderful like the eagle, but yet the bee is a small, and it's one of those wonderful flying creatures, and yet its produce is the sweetest of the sweet.
Absolutely.
And we depend so much on the bee.
I know. And sometimes we can make the mistake and, you know, think about the big things that we've done, whether it's the Grand Ole Opry or arenas or whatever. And sometimes just going and singing to a few people, whether it's, you know, in a small setting, or just a word of encouragement, or praying for somebody, that can be so much more important as well.
Can reach. God, the Holy Spirit moves.
Absolutely.
In many ways. Just something else a little bit small as part
You're
of the...
keeping me busy, James, yes.
Every artist, if we'd be delighted if you'd include a line of how God means to you.
Absolutely,
to Colin Elliot. So I'm going to give you this, and it's going to be included we hope, in a song.
Okay.
By the time that the program is finished, we'll get a song composed from all the artists. So I'm going to...
Thank you so much.
Gladly, hopefully, write a line for us.
I will indeed.
Well, Colin, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure interviewing you, and it's inspiring, and I think people are going to really enjoy your life, your music, and your faith and your story, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you, James. Thank you for the opportunity to come and share with you and your audience today.
Thank you. Well, folks, you at home, thanks for joining us again on Rewind with James Kilbane. Till the next time, thank you, God bless you all, and bye for now.
We all travel on gravel and grace. We all travel on gravel and grace. travel and grace.
Are you searching for fulfillment? Discover true happiness. Stay tuned to Shalom World.